I always thought I was smarter than the average internet user. You know, the type that rolls their eyes at all those horror stories about the dark web. I'd read them before, the Reddit threads, where someone's cousin's friend apparently bought a haunted doll or got their house raided after ordering drugs online. I always thought they were fake, exaggerated for clicks, but now I wish I could go back to being that smug, skeptical guy, because now I know better. It all started because I was bored. I'd been scrolling Reddit late at night, going deeper into the kind of threads you only find when your sleep schedule is completely trashed. Somewhere between conspiracy theories and creepy, unexplained mysteries, someone mentioned a dark website where you could watch live mysteries. The thread didn't have a lot of upvotes, which should have been a red flag, but curiosity is a killer, and I was too intrigued to care. So I did what any idiot does when they think they're invincible. I Googled how to get onto the dark web. It wasn't even hard. A quick download of Tor, a couple of YouTube tutorials, and I was in. The adrenaline rush of accessing something so forbidden made my hands shake as I typed in the link from the Reddit thread. The site was called Eyes Only Live. The homepage was underwhelming. A black screen with a single message in white text, "Welcome. Enter at your own risk." Below it was a button that said "Agree and Enter." I hovered my mouse over it for way longer than I should have. A part of me was screaming not to do it, but that only made me want to do it more. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, daring myself to jump. So I clicked. At first, it looked like a live streaming site. There were channels with weird names: Room 17, The Woods, Feeding Time. Most of the thumbnails were black screens or blurry, low-light images. It was all so vague that I couldn't tell what I was looking at. Then I saw one called The Watcher's Feed. The thumbnail was unsettling. It looked like a person sitting in a dark room staring at a wall. It was grainy, but something about it felt off. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The stream started with static. Then, slowly, an image began to take shape. It wasn't a room. It was a live feed of someone walking down a street. The camera was shaky, like it was being held by someone following close behind. The person on screen didn't seem to notice. They were just walking, headphones in, head down. My stomach twisted as I realized it wasn't a random video. It was happening in real time. I told myself it was staged, probably just some low-budget attempt at being creepy, but then the camera zoomed in on the person's face and they looked scared, panicked, like they could feel someone behind them, but were too afraid to turn around. I felt sick watching it, but I couldn't look away. And then the screen went black. I thought the stream had ended until white text appeared on the screen. Next feed starting in 10 seconds. My mouse hovered over the X to close the browser, but I hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe I was too numb to process what I'd just seen. Maybe I was curious about what was coming next. Either way, I didn't close it. The next feed started, and this time it was someone sitting in their living room watching TV. The angle was weird, like the camera was hidden in the corner of the room. They had no idea they were being watched. I could hear the faint sound of their TV show, some sitcom laugh track cutting through the eerie silence. And then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the corner of the screen there was a timestamp, a real-time clock, and next to it an IP address. It didn't hit me right away. I stared at the numbers for a few seconds before it clicked. That was my IP address. The realization hit me like a truck. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I scrambled to close the browser, but before I could, the screen changed again. This time, it wasn't a random street or some stranger's living room. It was my room. The camera was angled from above like it was hidden in the ceiling. I could see myself sitting at my desk, staring at my computer. I froze. My mind went blank. I couldn't process what I was looking at. Then the chat box on the stream lit up with a single message. Smile for the camera. I don't even remember standing up. 1 second, I was sitting there, staring at the screen, and the next, I was tearing my room apart. I ripped out every cord, every device, looking for a camera, but there was nothing. No hidden lens, no sign that anyone had been in my room. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the faint hum of my computer, still on and still streaming. The chat box lit up again. Check your inbox. Against every instinct screaming at me not to, I opened my email. There was one new message, no subject line, sent from an address that was just a string of random letters and numbers. The body of the email was short. We see you. We know you. We're watching. Don't try to run. Attached to the email was a photo. It was me, sitting at my desk, staring at my computer. The angle was slightly different from the stream, like the photo had been taken by someone standing just behind me. My stomach churned. I hadn't heard anything. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards, nothing. I deleted the email and shut my laptop, but I knew it was too late. Whoever they were, they had everything. My IP, my location, my picture. And worst of all, they wanted me to know it. I sat there in silence, too scared to move, waiting for the inevitable sound of someone breaking down my door. But it never came. At least, not that night. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was standing over me, watching. My apartment had never felt so small, so vulnerable. Every creak of the floor, every gust of wind outside sent me into a panic. By the time the sun came up, I had convinced myself it was all just a cruel prank. Maybe a hacker messing with me for laughs. That was the only explanation that made sense, right? But when I opened my laptop the next morning, my stomach dropped. The email I had deleted was back. Same sender, same message, same picture of me at my desk. This time, though, there was a second photo attached. It was a picture of my front door, taken from the outside. I locked every door and window in my apartment. I even shoved a chair under the doorknob like I'd seen in movies, though I knew it wouldn't do much if someone really wanted to get in. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I called the police. The officer on the other end sounded polite but uninterested. I explained everything. The dark website, the live stream, the emails, but as soon as I mentioned the dark web, her tone shifted. She said something about how these things are usually hoaxes or exaggerated claims, then told me to contact a cybersecurity expert. That was it. She didn't even ask for my address. I felt helpless. No one was going to help me. I was on my own. That afternoon, I decided to leave my apartment for the first time since it happened. I figured maybe I was just being paranoid, and some fresh air would help. But as I stepped outside, I noticed something strange. There was a car parked across the street, an old beat-up sedan with tinted windows. It wasn't unusual for cars to park there, but this one felt out of place. I stood there for a moment, pretending to check my phone, but my eyes were locked on the car. The windows were so dark I couldn't see inside, but I had that feeling again, that awful, gut-churning feeling of being watched. I told myself I was imagining things and started walking toward the corner store. But as soon as I rounded the block, I heard the distinct sound of an engine starting up. The car followed me. At first, I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence. Maybe they just happened to be going in the same direction. But every time I crossed a street or turned a corner, they were right there. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My palms were slick with sweat. I kept glancing over my shoulder, hoping to see someone, anyone that I could run to for help. but the sidewalks were empty. It was just me and the car. Finally, I ducked into an alleyway, my legs trembling as I crouched behind a dumpster. The car rolled past slowly, its tires crunching over the gravel. For a moment, I thought I was safe. But then I heard the car stop. A door opened, followed by the sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. I held my breath, pressing myself against the cold, grimy wall of the alley. I couldn't see who it was, but I could hear them. They were moving slowly, like they were taking their time. Like they knew exactly where I was. And then they stopped. The footsteps were so close I could feel the vibrations through the ground. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying they wouldn't see me. My mind was racing, cycling through every stupid decision that had led me to this moment. If I survived, I swore I would never go near the dark web again. But just as suddenly as the footsteps had started, they stopped. I heard the car door slam, the engine rev, and then nothing. They were gone. I stayed crouched behind that dumpster for what felt like hours, too scared to move. When I finally worked up the courage to peek out, the street was empty. My hands were shaking as I pulled my phone out of my pocket and called a friend, Sam. Sam wasn't exactly the best person to call in a crisis, but he was the only one I could trust not to laugh at me. I didn't tell him everything, just that I thought someone was following me and I needed to crash at his place for a while. To my relief, he didn't ask too many questions. He just told me to get my ass over there. The bus ride to Sam's felt like the longest ride of my life. Every time we stopped to pick up a passenger, I scanned their faces, half expecting to see someone staring directly at me. But no one paid me any attention. I started to think maybe I was overreacting, letting my paranoia get the best of me. When I got to Sam's, I felt a wave of relief. His apartment was small and cluttered, but it felt safe. I told him I was dealing with some internet drama and just needed to lay low for a while. He didn't push for details, which I appreciated. That night, we ordered pizza and tried to watch a movie. I almost started to feel normal again. But then my phone buzzed. It was another email. This time, the message was shorter. You can run, but you can't hide. Attached was another photo. It was me, standing outside Sam's apartment. I felt the blood drain from my face. My vision blurred as I stared at the screen, my mind racing. How the hell did they know where I was? I hadn't told anyone except Sam, and there was no way he would have sold me out. I showed him the email, and his reaction was exactly what I expected. Pure disbelief. "This has to be a scam," he said, shaking his head. "Like some kind of phishing thing. They're just trying to scare you." "Then how do they have this picture?" I shot back, my voice cracking. "How do they know where I am?" Sam didn't have an answer. He just stared at the screen, his face pale. "We spent the next few hours trying to figure out what to do." Sam suggested calling the cops again, but I knew it would be useless. If they didn't take me seriously the first time, why would they now? I thought about going to a hotel, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Whoever these people were, they could find me anywhere. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured someone standing outside the apartment, watching, waiting. By the time the sun came up, I was exhausted, but I had a plan. I was done running. If they wanted to play games, fine, but I wasn't going to let them win. By morning, I wasn't just scared. I was angry. My fear had boiled into frustration, and frustration had turned into determination. Whoever was messing with me clearly wanted me to crumble, to panic. Fine, I'd been panicking, but now I was going to fight back. The first thing I did was take my laptop and phone and shut them both off. If they were tracking me through those, I wasn't going to give them the chance. Sam, bless his heart, kept trying to convince me to go to the police, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't something the cops could or would help with. I had to figure it out myself. I told Sam I was heading out, but I didn't tell him where. I didn't want to drag him any further into my mess. He tried to argue, but I shut him down and left before he could follow. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. My first stop was a cheap electronics store. I bought a burner phone and paid in cash, avoiding eye contact with the cashier. The whole time, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting that car to be parked outside again. It wasn't, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I headed to a public library next, one of the few places I figured would be safe to use the internet without being traced. I sat down at one of the public computers and opened Tor, my heart pounding as I typed in the URL for eyesonly.live again. The site loaded instantly. The black screen and the ominous message were exactly the same. Welcome. Enter at your own risk. I hovered over the agree and enter button for a long time. Part of me was screaming not to do it, but the other part, the part that couldn't stand not knowing, won out. I clicked. The same list of channels appeared. Room 17. The woods. Feeding time. But now, a new one was at the top of the list, highlighted in red. Subject 42. Live feed. My stomach twisted. Subject 42. I didn't have to guess who that was. I clicked on the feed, my hands shaking so badly that I almost missed the button. The stream opened, and there I was. The screen showed a grainy video of me sitting in the library, hunched over the computer. It wasn't even a delay. This was live. I spun around in my chair, my eyes scanning the room for anyone suspicious. But the library was nearly empty. Just an old man reading a newspaper in the corner and a bored-looking librarian at the front desk. No one had a camera pointed at me. The chat box on the stream lit up. Nice to see you again, Subject 42. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but I had no idea what to type. What was I supposed to say? Was I supposed to respond at all? Another message popped up. Looking for answers, are we? Don't worry, we'll give you what you're looking for. Before I could react, the stream switched. The video cut to a dark room, lit only by a single, flickering light bulb. At first, I thought it was empty, but then I saw movement in the corner. It was a man tied to a chair. His head was slumped forward, and his breathing was shallow and ragged. He was covered in bruises and cuts, and his clothes were soaked with blood. My stomach churned as I realized he was still alive, barely. The chat box exploded with messages. 42's future? Play the game. He knows too much. I wanted to shut the computer off, to run, but I couldn't move. My eyes were glued to the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The camera zoomed in on the man's face. His eyes fluttered open, and for a split second, he looked directly at the camera. His lips moved, forming a single word. Run. The stream cut to black. I was shaking so hard I could barely breathe. My thoughts were a tangled mess of panic and confusion. Who was that man? What did they mean by play the game? And why the hell were they targeting me? The screen changed again, this time displaying another message in white text. Your turn. Don't keep us waiting. I slammed the laptop shut and bolted out of the library. My mind was racing, my pulse thundering in my ears. They were watching me. They had been watching me the whole time. But why? Why me? I barely made it a block before my burner phone buzzed. I yanked it out of my pocket, my hands trembling as I read the message. Nice try, 42. You can't run from us. Attached was a video. My finger hovered over the play button, every instinct screaming at me not to watch. But curiosity and fear got the better of me. I pressed play. The video showed my apartment. The camera panned slowly through the living room, the The kitchen, the hallway. It stopped at my bedroom door. The door creaked open, revealing my empty room. Empty, except for a knife lying on my bed. The camera lingered on the knife for a moment before the screen went black. I didn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't. Instead, I went to the police station, finally convinced that I couldn't handle this on my own. When I explained everything to the officer at the front desk, she gave me the same look you give a crazy person on the subway. She wrote down my statement, but I could tell she didn't believe me. She said they'd look into it and sent me on my way. I left the station feeling more hopeless than ever. No one was going to save me. And that's when I got the second message. Game on, 42. We're just getting started. I didn't go back to Sam's or my apartment. Instead, I checked into a dingy motel on the edge of town under a fake name, paying in cash. The room smelled like mildew and stale cigarettes, but it felt like the safest place in the world compared to the nightmare I was living. I kept the curtains closed and shoved a chair under the doorknob, my heart racing at every little sound from outside. But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. They already knew where I was. I sat on the edge of the creaky bed, staring at the burner phone in my hands. The screen was dark, but I couldn't stop checking it every few minutes, waiting for the next message. I was too scared to sleep, too paranoid to eat. My mind kept replaying the image of that man in the chair, the word "run" on his lips, and the knife on my bed. Around midnight, the phone buzzed. My heart sank. I stared at it for what felt like hours before finally mustering the courage to check the message. "You're in?" Before I could even process what that meant, another message came through. Rule 1, obey. A third message followed seconds later, this time with a video attachment. My thumb hovered over the play button, my stomach in knots, but I had to know. I pressed play. The video was grainy, the lighting dim. It showed a room similar to the one I'd seen before, the same flickering light bulb, the same sense of dread hanging in the air. But this time, there were two people in the room. One was a woman, tied to a chair, her head slumped forward just like the man from the first video. She looked battered, bruises blooming across her arms and face, her breathing shallow. The second person was standing just behind her, wearing a black hoodie and a featureless white mask. The masked figure tilted their head as if they knew I was watching. Then they held up a piece of paper with a handwritten message, "Choose." The camera panned to the side, revealing two objects on a table, a knife and a syringe filled with some kind of dark liquid. The masked figure picked up the knife and held it to the woman's throat, the blade pressing into her skin just enough to draw a thin line of blood. The chat box on the screen filled with messages. 42's move. Pick wisely. Clock's ticking. Then a timer appeared in the corner of the screen, counting down from 60 seconds. I stared at the phone, my hands trembling. What the hell was I supposed to do? Was this even real? The woman's muffled sobs echoed in the background, and I could feel my chest tightening, my breath coming in short gasps. 50 seconds. I tried to think. If I didn't choose, would they kill her? If I did choose, what did that mean for me? 40 seconds. The chat box kept lighting up, taunting me. Pick. 42. She doesn't have all day. Blood or poison? This is taking too long. 30 seconds. My fingers hovered over the phone screen, frozen with indecision. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall, but I knew that wouldn't stop them. They wanted me to play their game, and they weren't going to let me back out. 20 seconds. I typed a single word. Syringe. The chat exploded with reactions. Interesting. Soft heart, huh? Good choice, 42. For now. The masked figure nodded, as if acknowledging my decision. They set the knife down and picked up the syringe, walking slowly toward the woman. She was sobbing uncontrollably now, shaking her head, but there was nothing she could do. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I watched as they jabbed the syringe into her neck and pushed the plunger down. Her body convulsed, her eyes rolling back into her head as foam bubbled from her lips. Within seconds, she went limp. The screen went black. I sat there in stunned silence, my entire body trembling. I had no idea if what I'd just seen was real or staged, but it felt real. Too real. My phone buzzed again. "Good job, 42. You're learning." I threw the phone onto the bed and buried my face in my hands, fighting back the urge to scream. This wasn't just some sick joke. This was a game, a twisted, sadistic game, and I was their newest player. But why? Why me? Another message came through. Rule 2, don't cheat. Attached was another video. I didn't want to watch it, but I had to. My fingers felt like lead as I pressed play. The video showed a man sitting in a room, my motel room. He was wearing a black hoodie, his face obscured by the same white mask. The camera zoomed in on his hands, which were holding my laptop. My stomach churned as I realized what they were showing me. The camera panned to the side, revealing the table next to the bed. On it was a piece of paper with a handwritten message. "We're closer than you think." I froze. My eyes darted to the table next to me. The paper was there, sitting exactly as it had been in the video. My hands shook as I picked it up, my breath catching in my throat. The writing was the same. "We're closer than you think." I dropped the paper and bolted for the door, but when I yanked it open, the hallway was empty. No masked figure, no sign of anyone, just the faint sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I slammed the door shut and shoved the chair back under the knob, my entire body trembling. They had been in my room. While I was sitting in that library trying to figure out what to do, they had been here, watching, waiting. Another message buzzed onto my phone. Rule 3, don't run. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't play their game, but deep down, I knew I didn't have a choice. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I was a shell of myself. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. My body was running on pure adrenaline and fear. Every creak of the motel walls, every muffled voice from the other rooms sent me into a spiral. I'd barricaded the door with the dresser, stacked the nightstand on top of it, and kept a lamp clutched in my hand like a weapon. But I knew it wouldn't matter. If they wanted to get to me, they could. I was their pawn, and they were moving the pieces. The phone buzzed again. I didn't even flinch this time. It was like my brain had given up on trying to protect me from the inevitable. I picked it up with trembling hands and opened the message. "Ready for the final round, 42? Another video attachment. My stomach twisted as I pressed play. The screen showed a dark room, similar to the ones in the earlier videos, but this time the camera panned to reveal two people. One of them was tied to a chair, a young man, blindfolded, gagged, his chest rising and falling in panicked breaths. The second person was holding a knife. They were wearing the same black hoodie and white mask as before, but something about them felt off. The way they moved, the way they tilted their head, it was deliberate, taunting. The camera zoomed in on the knife, which had something carved into the blade. 42. The masked figure held up a piece of paper with a message written in bold black letters. "Your turn to act. Check the drawer." My stomach dropped. Slowly I turned toward the nightstand. The drawer was slightly open, just enough to make it clear that it had been tampered with. I set the phone down and reached for the drawer, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grip the handle. Inside was a single item, a knife. It was identical to the one in the video, down to the 42 carved into the blade. The phone buzzed again. "Choose them or you." I stared at the message, my mind racing. What the hell did they mean? Them or me? Was this another sick game? Another test? The phone buzzed again, and this time it was a live feed. It was my motel room. The camera was positioned somewhere in the corner, pointed directly at me. I could see myself sitting on the bed, the knife in one hand and the phone in the other. My blood ran cold as I realized what they were telling me. They were watching. They were always watching. The chat box on the live stream lit up. 42's move. Don't stall. Let's see what you're made of. And then the screen split in two. One side showed me sitting frozen on the bed. The other side showed the blindfolded man in the chair. The masked figure moved closer to him, pressing the knife against his throat just enough to draw blood. The timer appeared in the corner again. 60 seconds, I tried to think. There had to be a way out of this, a way to end the game, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see it. 50 seconds. The chat was relentless. Hurry up, 42! No room for cowards. Act or we'll act for you. 40 seconds. I looked at the knife in my hand, the blade glinting in the dim light of the motel room. My reflection stared back at me, distorted and twisted. 30 seconds. The blindfolded man in the video let out a muffled scream, his body jerking against the ropes that held him. The masked figure tilted their head again, as if amused. 20 seconds. My breathing was ragged, my vision blurred by tears. I didn't want to play their game anymore. I didn't want to be a pawn. 10 seconds. The chat exploded with messages, the timer counting down faster than I could think. 5, 4, 3. I screamed and threw the knife across the room, the blade embedding itself into the wall with a sickening thud. The screen went black. For a moment, there was silence. I thought it was over. Maybe I had won. Maybe refusing to play their game was the answer all along. But then the phone buzzed one last time. Wrong choice. 42. Game over. The live feed returned, but it wasn't the motel room or the blindfolded man. It was Sam. He was tied to a chair, just like the others, his face bruised and bloody. His head lolled forward, and for a moment I thought he was dead. But then he let out a weak, pained groan. The chat lit up with messages. 42's punishment. Should have acted. Your fault, 42. The camera zoomed in on Sam's face, his swollen eyes barely able to open. He looked directly into the camera, his lips trembling. Why? He whispered. The feed cut out. I screamed, throwing the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, pieces scattering across the floor. But it didn't matter. They were done with me. The game was over. I left the motel that night and never went back. I didn't go to the police, didn't contact anyone I knew. I just ran. To this day, I don't know who they were or why they chose me. But I do know one thing. They're still out there, watching, waiting. And if you're ever tempted to explore the dark web, don't. Because once you're in their game, there's no way out.